All the other human beings, most of them, they are blindly following their parents. The Christian, he is a Christian because father is a Christian. The person is a Hindu because father is a Hindu. Most of the Muslims are Muslims because their fathers are Muslim. This atheist is thinking, his father, his parents may be religious, but he does not believe in the gods which his parents worship. Most of the atheists, we realize, have become atheists because they believe in science and technology. These people think that science has advanced so much, we don't require any scripture, we don't require any religion, etc. The first question I ask to the atheist is that suppose there is an equipment, there is a machinery which no one in the world has ever seen before. If it's brought in front of you, if it's brought in front of the atheist, and if we ask the question to him, that who will be the first person who will be able to tell you the mechanism of this machinery or this object, what can be his reply? What can he reply? Suppose a machinery who no one in the world has seen, if it's brought in front of the atheist and he's asked the question, who will be the first person who will tell you the mechanism of this machinery or object? The reply the atheist will give you is the first person who will tell you the mechanism is the manufacturer. Some may say the creator, some may say the inventor, some may say the producer. Whatever they say, it will be somewhat similar. Either they say the creator, the manufacturer, the producer, the inventor. It will be somewhat similar. Just keep it at the back of your mind.
You there, David?
Yeah, hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. Well, I'm going to first off start saying I'm actually a Roman Catholic. And, I mean, I respect you guys' views and everything.
So are you a Roman Catholic that adheres to the previous pope or the current pope with regard to things like evolution?
Both.
Well, the current pope is trying to change so that evolution is no longer acceptable.
Well, I didn't want to exactly touch on that right now.
Okay.
But I did want to bring up the topic of creation with you guys. Sorry, this is kind of weird. It's like an echo with my TV.
Yeah, turn the TV down. It'll make it easier.
Okay. I just wanted to give you guys something to think about here. Let's suppose you were walking down like a path, like in a creek. You're in the woods or something, and you come across a watch.
Time out. Time out. This is the Watchmaker argument, and it's exactly what I talked about at the beginning of the show, only Ray Comfort comes up with painter and painting, and he tries to disguise it. Basically, the argument is if you find this watch lying on a beach, you instantly recognize, because of its complexity and sense of purpose, that it was in fact intelligently designed. That's exactly where you're going, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. That argument has been demonstrated to be so horribly flawed, and yet I understand completely why it's presented, because it seems so reasonable. The reason why you recognize the watch is designed has nothing to do with how complex it is, how ordered it is, or any perceived sense of purpose. It's because you already know the watch is designed. You have a million examples of watches being designed, and none of them occurring naturally. And the occurring naturally is the key element. Humans occur naturally. Animals occur naturally. Rocks occur naturally. Buildings and watches don't. Now, some people have lodged certain objections to that, but I'd like to say that if you draw your analogy, your watchmaker analogy out to its logical conclusion, that there is a God, and he created the universe and everything in it. Then in reality, he also created the grains of sand on that beach, and therefore you are walking along a beach full of watches next to an ocean full of watches and a stream and a tree made of watches, and you're reaching down and picking up one watch and saying, this watch is so vastly different from the millions and trillions of other watches that are surrounding me that it is therefore proof of a designer. It is a self-reinforcing argument. You're inventing a claim based on, as I talked about earlier in the show, which you might have missed, we recognize the design because we've scaffolded ourselves up to the point where we can identify that this is actually the case. that this is actually designed. We don't get to put the designed label on it until we're certain that it is.
Well, I think you guys are missing the point of the analogy. I mean, let's bring this up. Let's say you were walking down that same path, and you see an eye laying on the ground.
And how is that different?
Well, it's not different. That's the point. You see an eye laying on the ground, and you instantly recognize, oh, that's an eye. It is made for the purpose of seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Just switching the watch to the eye doesn't do anything to discount what I just said.
Well, I'm not trying to make a difference. I'm trying to draw the similarity between the two. You recognize that both of them are made.
I've already granted you that there's no difference in your argument whether you put a watch on the beach or an eyeball on the beach. I'll grant you there's no difference.
Uh-huh.
My rebuttal stands. I mean, how is it you think this is an argument for design? Because when you look around at humans, for example, you may see things that you identify as design or purpose. But in reality, the distinction, as I pointed out, is that humans occur naturally and watches don't.
Okay. The main point of the analogy, I'm not trying to say that humans and watches are one and the same. I'm just trying to bring across the point that you recognize that the watch was made for a purpose.
No, you don't. You didn't listen to what I said.
Both.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, let you guys know. I just wanted to bring up this topic just to see what you guys thought about it. I'm sorry I didn't at the beginning of the show hear what you guys had to say.
That's all right. I think if there's plenty of answers online to this, and
Yeah.
many of them are going to be better than mine. But
Well,
what your basic
I still hold to what I say, and I still believe that everything I still believe. But I just feel like a lot of people in the atheist community are. I'm not trying to offend you guys or anything, but
you will
look at yourselves and ask yourselves: are we relying on science too much? Are we being arrogant?
That's absolute and utter. That's an absolute and utter nonsense. You're trying to denigrate science in order to bolster faith.
No.
Hang on. You are believing in something without any rational evidence, without any good reason to do so, and yet, in order to prop that up, you're willing to say, aren't you relying on science a little too much? In order to say you're relying on science a little too much, you first need to demonstrate that there is some better way of knowing. That's what this is all about, is a way to figure out and understand reality. And so far, science, the scientific method, the building of scientific models, has been the single most consistent, reliable method for discerning the difference between fact and fiction that we've ever come across. Nobody's suggested a possible better route, way to find the truth. All people do is hypothesize and claim divine revelation, personal experience, blind faith. These aren't ways to the truth. These are trappings. These are ways to believe what you want to believe. And until you can demonstrate that there's some better way of determining reality from non-reality than science, then your argument or your claim that maybe we're relying on science too much is patently absurd. And it's only made in order to bolster up the idea that you're not completely silly for relying on things for pure faith reasons. And in fact, you are. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, although it will be, and it's fair, because, you kind of did the same thing a second ago. I'm just saying that believe things for good reasons. Care about whether or not your beliefs are most likely true, more probably true. If you base, is there anything that's more likely to give us a correct answer than science?
Can I just give you one more thing to look at?
Sure, since you want to answer the question, give me one thing. We got 5 minutes and then we're done.
Okay. There is scientifically proven that, I don't know how much you know about the Catholic faith, but a priest, as he was giving Mass, he was a little bit doubtful of the Eucharist. You know what the Eucharist is?
Yes.
he was doubtful of it, and he was doubtful of Jesus' blood. And as a sign, during Mass, Jesus turned that piece of flesh into his own flesh. And the wine, he turned that into his own blood. And this is fact because both the body and the blood have been preserved for over 1,700.
You need to stop believing things on faith and actually examine and use a little bit of reason, a little bit of critical thinking, and look for scientific evidence. Instead of worrying about whether or not we're relying too much on science, maybe you should try and exercise a little science. There's claims of saints' bodies being preserved perfectly. These things have scientific explanations. The Catholic Church is rife with hoaxes and false stories, anything to exonerate and magnify the saints. It's patently absurd. If what you claim was true, everybody on earth would know it. No miracle has ever occurred. No miracle has ever been demonstrated. No miracle has ever been proven. If it had happened, everybody would know. It would be the ultimate story. There would be no atheists. There would be no significant debate on the issues. The fact is, you're relying on things for no good reason. And I'm sorry that we wasted so much time to get around to a Eucharist story. By the way, which part of Jesus did it turn into? Was it the foreskin, maybe? The Bible seems extremely obsessed with foreskin. I'm betting that's what it was. All right, so that was a little mean.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. I regard the hypothesis of the existence of God as a scientific hypothesis. And in this, I disagree with many of my scientific colleagues who feel that science and religion have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and you can be a perfectly good scientist while your religious belief is a purely private matter that has nothing whatever to do with your science. I think that's wrong because a universe with a God would be a completely different kind of universe from one without, and the difference would be a scientific difference. God, by the way, could clinch the matter in a heartbeat in his favor if he chose to intervene, for example, at this very moment. The only one of the traditional arguments for God that is still widely used today is the teleological argument, sometimes called the argument from design. It's the famous Watchmaker argument. Surely one of the most superficially plausible bad arguments ever discovered. And it's rediscovered by just about everybody until they learn the logical fallacy of it and/or they learn Darwin's brilliant alternative. In the familiar world of human artifacts, things like watches, computers, complicated things that look designed are designed. To naive observers, it seems to follow that similarly complicated things in the natural world that look designed, things like eyes and hearts, are designed too. This is not just a bad argument by analogy, it's a bad argument by statistical reasoning as well. It's fallacious, but it carries an illusion of plausibility. If you randomly scramble the fragments of an eye or a heart 1,000,000 times, you probably won't hit on one that can see or pump. This demonstrates that such devices could not have been put together by chance, by random chance. And there are many people who think that the only alternative to random chance is design. Because of the lamentable scientific education of most British and American students, there are many people who simply don't know what Darwinian natural selection is, and therefore the only alternative to chance that many people can imagine is design. The English astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle dramatized his own version of that misunderstanding. He suggested that a hurricane blowing through a junkyard would be as likely to assemble by luck a Boeing 747 as that natural selection could put together life as we know it. Even before Darwin came along and gave us the answer, the impotence of the argument from design was glaring. How could it ever have been a good idea to postulate as an explanation for the existence of complex, improbable things a designer who would have to be even more complex and improbable than that which he's being invoked to explain? The entire argument is an obvious logical non-starter, as the great philosopher David Hume realized before Darwin was born. But what Hume didn't know was the supremely elegant alternative to both chance and design that Darwin was to give to us. Natural selection is so stunningly powerful and elegant. It not only explains the whole of life, it raises our consciousness and boosts our confidence in science's future ability to explain probably everything else. Essentially, what's wrong with creationism, stroke intelligent design, there's no difference, by the way, is that it is what the philosopher Daniel Dennett calls a skyhook. A skyhook is a great hand that comes out of the sky, unexplained, and starts manipulating things in the world. And superficially, it looks as though this great hand is explaining something. But of course, it explains nothing, because it lacks an explanation itself. That's a skyhook. The opposite of a skyhook is a crane. A crane really does do explanatory work. Natural selection is the crane par excellence. Natural selection is cumulative. It starts from simple beginnings and works up by gradual degrees, incremental degrees, to the prodigious heights of complexity and improbability that we see in the living world. Here's a couple of examples of the products of natural selection, of the great crane of cumulative natural selection. On the right is a rose thorn, an adaptation by roses to avoid being eaten, and that thorn has been carved and shaped by natural selection over many generations. On the left, those are not rose thorns, those are bugs. They too have been carved and shaped by natural selection into the shape of a rose thorn as protection against their own predators. Natural selection is not just an alternative to chance, it's the only ultimate alternative to chance that's ever been suggested. Design is a workable alternative, but only in the short term, because you still have to explain where the designer came from. Francis Crick and Leslie Orgel, distinguished molecular biologists, once playfully speculated that life on this planet may indeed have been designed. This is their theory of directed panspermia, whereby an alien intelligence from outer space seeded our planet with a rocket in whose nose cone were bacteria. And that's where all of life sprang from. They didn't really believe that, but they put it forward as an interesting hypothesis. It's interesting from my point of view because I see nothing wrong with it. It could be right. It seems to be very unlikely, but it could be right. But whatever else you can say, it cannot be the ultimate explanation, because you still have to explain where the alien intelligences from outer space came from. Sooner or later, that regress has got to be terminated. If the aliens from outer space were themselves seeded by another rocket from a different planet, you still haven't solved the problem. Finally, you've got to terminate the regress by postulating a crane instead of a skyhook. And the obvious crane would be evolution by natural selection. The logic of creationist arguments is always the same. Some natural phenomenon is too statistically improbable, too complex, too beautiful, too awe-inspiring to have come into existence by chance. Design is the only alternative to chance that the author can imagine. Therefore, design must have done it. And science's answer to this faulty logic is also always the same. Design is not the only alternative to chance. Natural selection is a better alternative. Notice what rotten logic it is. We have theory A and theory B. Theory A is supported by loads of evidence. Theory B is supported by no evidence at all. Now here's the key step in the argument. 4. I can't understand how theory A explains phenomenon X. Therefore, theory B must be right.